Today we're going to talk about PUBG Mobile from Tencent. This was a campaign for the launch of PUBG on the mobile platform. As many of you know, PUBG was released on PC and already had a huge IP and a huge standing. And then Tencent took it upon themselves to publish the game on mobile, both in the Western and in Asian markets. So we executed this campaign over the course of more or less 2 months in various different regions.
For the first campaign, we focused on Germany, France, and any Spanish-speaking countries, Spain and Latin America. And for the second campaign, we just focused on English-speaking influencers in general. We worked with British influencers, but also with American ones. And we also specifically looked for influencers who could potentially link up and play together, because obviously it's an online game and it's more fun when you play with friends.
We started off at the end of Q1 2018 and we're still running today activations for the game. So for example, what we did with PUBG Mobile is we supported their appearance at Gamescom and we invited influencers from all over Europe and the US to play with the community attending Gamescom. And the nice thing about that one is that we didn't limit it only to Gamescom, but we also posted a lot of things online, a lot of the footage, a lot of the pictures from the event, so that we could reach a wider audience. The goal of this campaign was to not establish the brand, because PUBG is an existing brand and IP with a lot of strength, but to show how the brand ported well to the mobile platform and to convert users that firstly already know the brand to actually test out the game on mobile. That was the primary goal. The secondary was to open up the target audience. And finally, we ended up with 51 different influencers that produced over 100 of pieces of content. So overall, it was a very large-scale campaign, which was difficult to coordinate, but which ended up reaching beyond our expectations and made the clients happy.
Alongside a very large gameplay component, it was of course also important to think about branding. This was a great opportunity to really look at the defining or iconic traits of what makes PUBG PUBG from a visual perspective, in terms of tone, in terms of gameplay mechanics, and bringing those to life or highlighting those in branding content. So for example, we knew very early on, before it was announced, that the desert map that already existed in the main game of PUBG would be coming to the mobile version soon after launch. We planned creatives that took place in a desert, actually in some of the real-life locations that desert map is based on, to bring that deserty tone and those textures to life. In terms of content, we had one very high-quality narrative-based short film that we did in collaboration with the influencers Corridor Digital. That really took a comedic spin on the PUBG universe. So some of the elements that we needed to capture in this creative content were the desert map, as I mentioned, the weapons, and the vehicular combat in particular, which was new, but also the experience of being able to play portably and how that differed very much to the existing PUBG game. Another really pertinent note of the way that this campaign was planned is to see that the creatives are always working in synergy with the gameplay components of the campaign. They're not isolated pieces of content, they're really part of the greater strategy, and the timings as such, as well as the concepts and the content which is being covered in the gameplay is then sort of reflected in some way in the creative content. That synergy really helps strengthen both and assures more organic impact and allows the content, the creative content, to entertain and directly address the audience who may be watching or consuming the gameplay content. And that of course always leads to a more authentic and more effective campaign overall.
What's never to be forgotten is the value of content as well. Performance on a short term is very important, but long-term content that actually impacts the way your brand is recognized and perceived is gonna have enormous value that you can't necessarily directly measure through installs or through engagement or through other metrics. There needs to be a balance between those classical ROI-driven KPIs and the understanding of what drives the long-term success of a brand and of a company.
Creative concepts are often particularly useful for mobile titles, but it's still often necessary to really highlight the wonder or the strengths of an IP beyond just raw gameplay, particularly with mobile titles. Creative concepts are kind of in their element at delivering that, being able to provide strong branding content without having to rely directly on the visual components or gameplay footage.